My CEO husband texted me at 2:17 a.m. From a business trip with his secretary. I'm sorry. She's pregnant. I want a divorce. I replied, before you shared a room, did you even read her medical clearance? At 2:17 in the morning, the vibration of Evelyn Lawson's phone pulled her out of a shallow sleep. A lamp still burned beside the bed, casting a muted amber circle over the silk coverlet. Evelyn had slept lightly for the past 3 years. It was a habit formed after she left Harborview Medical Center and became the wife who waited for Daniel Carter to return from late client dinners. If he arrived at midnight with heartburn, she warmed soup. If he arrived at 3 smelling of bourbon, she made tea and left antacids beside the sink. The screen was painfully bright in the dark. The sender was pinned at the top of her messages. Daniel. 5 separate texts had arrived 2 minutes earlier. Evelyn, we need to talk. Megan is pregnant. Almost 3 months. She's emotionally fragile, and her doctor says she needs stability. I know this hurts you, but she depends on me. I want a divorce. You can keep the house. Consider it compensation. My attorney will contact you about everything else. I hope you can understand. Evelyn read the messages once, then again, then a third time. Her fingers went cold. The bedroom was so quiet she could hear her own pulse. Beyond the windows, the gated neighborhood lay perfectly still under rows of ornamental trees and discreet security lights. She sat up. The strap of her nightgown slipped from one shoulder, revealing a pale surgical scar near her collarbone. 3 years earlier, after spending weeks caring for Daniel's mother through a difficult recovery, Evelyn had collapsed from exhaustion and suffered a spontaneous pneumothorax. Daniel had held her hand in the hospital and said, "Leave medicine. I'll take care of you." She had believed him. For 3 years, she became the kind of wife his family praised. She learned a dozen bland meals for his stomach. She memorized the allergies and preferences of his investors. She handled his parents' appointments, planned corporate dinners, and quietly corrected mistakes before anyone noticed them. She had once been one of the youngest attending obstetric surgeons at Harborview. Now she was a woman whose husband informed her by text, from a hotel room shared with his executive assistant, that the assistant was carrying his child. Evelyn did not cry. The expected pain never arrived. In its place came a clinical clarity, cold and precise, like the first incision made by a steady hand. She got out of bed and crossed the marble floor barefoot. The house Daniel had so generously offered her was valued at roughly $4.2 million. Her father had secretly supplied most of the down payment when Daniel's company was struggling, though Daniel believed the money came from a private bridge lender. Now he called the house compensation. Evelyn laughed once. The sound was quiet and strange in the empty room. She picked up her phone again but did not reply. Instead, she opened an encrypted folder labeled Continuing Medical Education. When she left Harborview, her former department chair, Dr. Margaret Hayes, had insisted that she maintain her license and continue receiving professional updates. "You are too talented to disappear into somebody's kitchen," Dr. Hayes had told her. "Read the bulletins. Attend the case conferences. Keep your mind alive, even if you refuse to come back." Evelyn had done that much. The newest bulletin included an anonymized alert about rising congenital syphilis risk and ectopic pregnancy complications among patients who had delayed prenatal care. It did not contain Megan Quinn's name. No legitimate report would. Evelyn's knowledge came from somewhere far simpler and entirely lawful. 6 weeks earlier, Megan had visited the Carter home with documents for Daniel to sign. She had left a sealed envelope on the kitchen counter. When she returned for it, the flap had already opened because the adhesive failed. Evelyn had not removed the papers, but the top page was visible, a medical clearance Megan had voluntarily submitted for an overseas assignment. It listed required follow-up for a reactive syphilis screening, a history of recurrent pelvic inflammatory disease, and an urgent recommendation for obstetric imaging after a positive pregnancy test accompanied by one-sided pain. Evelyn had placed the document back in the envelope without comment. She had assumed Megan would follow medical advice. Now Daniel's message said the pregnancy was almost 3 months along and that Megan was healthy. Evelyn checked the date of the clearance again in a photograph automatically captured by the home's document scanner. Daniel had asked her to digitize all business papers left at the house. The page had been scanned with the rest before Megan reclaimed it. The scan existed in a shared business archive Daniel could access. He had simply never looked. Evelyn called him. The phone rang 7 times. When he answered, soft music played in the background. A woman laughed nearby. Evelyn recognized Megan's breathy voice. Evelyn? Daniel sounded tired in the theatrical way people sounded when they wanted to make selfishness appear painful. Why are you awake? Evelyn stood before the full-length mirror. Her hair was loose, her face pale, but her eyes were clear. I saw your messages. He exhaled. I know I'm hurting you. But this has already happened. Megan needs me. She's carrying my child. So you chose 2 a.m. to announce our divorce by text? That's not fair. We've had nothing to say to each other for years. Megan understands my work. She helps me. Helps you with what? Your calendar, or your family planning? Evelyn, don't be cruel. I am trying to end this respectfully. I'm giving you the house. What more do you want? Once, he had knelt in front of her and promised a lifetime. Now he spoke as though the home her family had financed were a generous severance package. The divorce is fine, she said. His relief was audible. But I have one question. Before you shared a room with Megan, did you read the medical clearance she submitted for the Singapore project? Silence. What clearance? The one from 6 weeks ago. It recommended infectious disease follow-up and urgent imaging before international travel. Daniel's voice sharpened. What are you implying? Megan is young and healthy. Unlike you, Evelyn thought. Unlike the wife he claimed had become too fragile, too quiet, too disconnected from his ambitious life. I'm not implying anything, she said. I'm advising you to take her to an emergency department tonight. She reported pelvic pain and a positive pregnancy test, but the form showed no confirmed intrauterine pregnancy. At nearly 12 weeks, that is not something to ignore. You should both request full STI testing too. The music in the background seemed to vanish. Explain yourself. I just did. The scanned document is in the business archive under overseas personnel clearance. You have legal access because Megan submitted it for company travel and signed the release. Read it yourself. Evelyn, my attorney, will send a proposed separation agreement. Do not come home expecting me to wait. What attorney? What are you doing? She ended the call, then she blocked him on her personal phone and messaging accounts. She changed the security settings on the house, preserving access for lawyers and the property manager, and began packing. As dawn approached, Evelyn remembered the last operation she had performed before leaving Harborview. A young woman had arrived with a ruptured ectopic pregnancy and almost no measurable blood pressure. Evelyn had controlled the bleeding and completed the procedure in 37 minutes. Afterward, Dr. Hayes had placed a hand on her shoulder. Those hands belong in an operating room. Evelyn had traded the scalpel for a soup ladle, now she wanted her hands back. An encrypted email arrived from her father's longtime chief of staff. The subject read, confirmed. Attached was a professional biography of Dr. Ryan Hart, chief executive of Hart Medical Group and vice chair of Harborview's board. He had trained with Evelyn during residency and remained one of the few people who knew her family's identity. The note beneath the biography said, "Your father has spoken with Dr. Hart. He is available to assist with recredentialing, housing, or security." Evelyn closed the file. She showered, dressed, and packed the last suitcase before sunrise. 3 years was long enough to sleep through her own life. Daniel and Evelyn's marriage had once seemed to outsiders like proof that ambition and devotion could coexist. They met during a charity gala at Harborview, where Daniel was trying to persuade physicians to test an early cardiac monitoring device. He arrived with a prototype that failed halfway through the demonstration. Evelyn, then a senior resident, took the casing apart with a butter knife and found a loose connection. "Your engineers need to stop designing for conference rooms," she told him. "Machines behave differently around actual patients." Instead of being offended, Daniel laughed. "Then teach us." For the next year, Evelyn advised the startup without charging a fee. She introduced Daniel to clinicians, translated medical concerns into product requirements, and stayed after overnight shifts to review safety documentation. Daniel told everyone she was the smartest person he had ever met. When he proposed, he did it outside an operating room after waiting 6 hours for her shift to end. "I know your work will always matter," he said. "I will never ask you to become smaller for me." The promise lasted until his company began growing. At first, Evelyn left Harborview temporarily because Daniel's mother needed care after complicated spinal surgery. A 3-month leave became 6. Daniel's travel increased. When Evelyn discussed returning, he reminded her how difficult his schedule was and how much the family depended on her. "Just 1 more quarter," he said. Then she suffered the collapsed lung. Daniel cried beside her hospital bed and asked her to resign permanently. "I nearly lost you because you refused to rest," he said. "Let me take care of you for once." Evelyn mistook fear for respect. She submitted her resignation. Within a year, Daniel began speaking of medicine as a phase she had outgrown. At dinners, he introduced her as "the person who keeps me sane" rather than Dr. Evelyn Lawson. When guests asked whether she missed surgery, he answered for her. "Not really. She's happier at home." Evelyn would smile because correcting him in public seemed unkind. Silence accumulated until Daniel believed his version. Megan joined Karma Biotech 18 months before the hotel trip. She was quick, charming, and skilled at making executives feel important. She laughed at Daniel's jokes, praised decisions before understanding them, and described every ordinary kindness as proof that he was different from other powerful men. Evelyn noticed the shift long before the affair was confessed. Daniel began protecting his phone. He changed his travel schedule without telling her. A perfume Evelyn did not own lingered on his coat. When Megan delivered documents to the house, she looked around with the curiosity of someone measuring rooms she expected to occupy. Evelyn did not confront either of them immediately. She had spent years in operating rooms, where panic killed and evidence mattered. She documented financial records, photographed unusual expenses, and asked her father's chief of staff to recommend a divorce attorney without revealing why. The 2:17 a.m. message did not begin her preparation. It merely confirmed the diagnosis. Before leaving the house, Evelyn opened the safe in Daniel's study. She removed only her passport, medical license records, mother's jewelry, and copies of the trust documents. She left Daniel's watches, cash, and company seals untouched. She also preserved the business archive rather than deleting it. The medical clearance scan remained available to corporate compliance. She sent a notice to the company's privacy officer explaining that the archive contained sensitive employee material and should be restricted immediately. That decision would later matter. It proved she had not circulated Megan's information or used it as revenge. At 4:45 a.m., Evelyn stood in the kitchen where she had prepared thousands of meals. A pot soaked in the sink from Daniel's dinner the night before. For years, she had cleaned before sleeping because disorder made the morning harder. She left the pot where it was. It was a small rebellion, almost absurdly small, but it made her smile. The property manager arrived at 5 with a representative of the family trust. They inventoried the house and changed access under the trustee's authority. Daniel's personal belongings remained protected inside. He could retrieve them through counsel. Evelyn was not stealing a home. She was ending his assumption that everything connected to her was automatically his. When Ryan arrived, he did not ask whether she was certain. "Your father wanted to come himself," he said. "That would have turned this into a war before breakfast. He is already preparing for war. Tell him I want compliance review, not revenge. If Karma Biotech has violated contracts, the committees can act. If not, no one touches it." Ryan studied her. "You still protect Daniel?" "No. I protect myself from becoming him." That distinction guided everything she did afterward. Daniel stood in the hotel corridor at 2:34 a.m., staring at the call-ended screen. Megan appeared in the suite doorway wearing a satin robe. Her hair was tousled, and irritation hid beneath her concerned smile. "Who was that? You look awful. Was it your wife?" Daniel pulled away when she reached for him. "Go back inside." Her eyes filled immediately. "Why are you snapping at me?" "I need to check something." He opened the company's secure archive on his phone and searched the folder Evelyn had named. The file appeared almost at once. Overseas personnel medical clearance, Megan Quinn. The document existed because employees assigned to certain laboratory sites had to disclose conditions relevant to travel, vaccinations, emergency care, and occupational exposure. Megan had signed a limited release authorizing Daniel, as executive sponsor, and the corporate medical officer to review it. Daniel had signed the assignment without reading the attachment. His eyes moved down the page. Reactive treponemal screening, confirmatory testing and treatment documentation required. History of pelvic inflammatory disease. Positive pregnancy test with unilateral pain. Location of pregnancy not confirmed. Not medically cleared for travel pending evaluation. Daniel's mouth went dry. Megan. She stepped into the hall. What? When did you last see an obstetrician? Her face changed for less than a second. I told you. Last month. Everything was fine. Which doctor? Why are you interrogating me? Evelyn is trying to poison you against me. Answer the question. Megan crossed her arms over her stomach. The baby and I are fine. I didn't want to go through unnecessary tests. Have you had an ultrasound confirming the pregnancy is in the uterus? Of course. Show me. I don't have to prove our baby to you. The refusal landed harder than any answer. Daniel called the private concierge clinic his company used for executives. The overnight nurse could not release Megan's records, but she listened to the symptoms Daniel described and gave one instruction: take her to an emergency department immediately. Megan began crying. This is humiliating. Evelyn wants you to think I'm diseased because she can't give you a child. Get dressed. Daniel now. 40 minutes later, they entered the emergency department of St. Matthew's Medical Center. Megan tried to leave twice before triage. Each time, Daniel reminded her that refusing care after claiming to be pregnant would force him to question everything. She finally consented to examination and signed a release allowing him to remain during the consultation. The first blood test confirmed pregnancy hormone levels, but they were far lower than expected for the dates Megan had given him. The ultrasound found no gestational sac in the uterus. A complex mass near the right fallopian tube raised concern for an ectopic pregnancy. The obstetrician's face was grave. This can rupture and cause life-threatening internal bleeding. We need additional imaging and likely treatment tonight. Daniel gripped the back of a chair. She said she was 12 weeks pregnant. The findings do not support a healthy 12-week intrauterine pregnancy. Megan turned white. The infectious disease physician arrived next. Because Megan had consented to testing, the results were discussed openly in the room. Her syphilis screening remained reactive, with evidence that follow-up after prior treatment had been incomplete. She also tested positive for HSV-2 and high-risk HPV. None of those diagnoses made her immoral, and the doctors were careful to say so. They were treatable or manageable conditions. The danger lay in concealment, delayed care, and the possibility that Daniel had been exposed. He heard only fragments. Repeat testing. Partner notification. No unprotected contact until cleared. Possible surgery. Megan reached for him. I was going to tell you. Daniel stepped back. When? After I divorced my wife? After you got access to my insurance and company? I was scared. You told me you had a normal ultrasound. I thought it would become normal. The absurdity of the sentence left him speechless. The physician intervened firmly. This conversation can wait. Ms. Quinn may need urgent treatment. Mr. Carter, you also need testing, but blaming her will not change the medical facts. Daniel sat alone in a consultation room while Megan was taken for additional imaging. At 4 in the morning, a nurse drew his blood. He stared at the tubes filling dark red and remembered Evelyn's voice. Last warning. She had not screamed. She had not begged him to come home. She had given him information that might have saved his health and Megan's life. He had answered by accusing her of jealousy. When the physician returned, she explained that Megan's ectopic pregnancy had begun bleeding and required immediate surgery. The gestational age was much earlier than Megan claimed. There would be no viable baby. Daniel felt the floor tilt. The child for whom he planned to end a 7-year marriage did not exist in the form he had imagined. He tried calling Evelyn, blocked. He sent a message undelivered. He opened an email and typed, "Evelyn, I was wrong. Megan lied. I may have been exposed, and I need." He stopped. Need what? Her medical judgment? Her calm? Her ability to turn chaos into a plan. He had texted her a divorce notice from another woman's bed. Now, because that choice frightened him, he wanted his wife to return to the old role of rescuer. At 4:23, he remembered the separation appointment he had demanded for 9 o'clock. He could not divorce her now, not because love had returned. Fear had. He needed Evelyn to manage the consequences, accompany him through testing, and protect his company from scandal. He needed her competence as urgently as he had once resented it. He left St. Matthew's before Megan came out of surgery and drove toward the house. He did not know that Evelyn had already removed every personal item she intended to keep. At 5:41 a.m., Daniel's car stopped hard outside the house. Morning fog hung above the quiet street. He hurried to the front door and entered the code. The lock flashed red. He tried again. Wrong code. He pressed his thumb to the reader. Access denied. Impossible. He rang the bell repeatedly. Evelyn. Open the door. I know what happened. Megan lied to me. We need to talk. The intercom answered with static. He held the medical clearance printout toward the camera. You were right. I took her to the hospital. Please, Evelyn. No lights came on. His panic turned to anger, the emotion most available to people accustomed to being obeyed. This is my house too. You cannot lock me out. A black sedan rolled to the curb behind him. Dr. Ryan Hart stepped out wearing a charcoal overcoat. He opened the trunk and removed a silver suitcase. Then the side door of the house opened. Evelyn emerged in a cream wool suit with a narrow black belt. Her hair was secured in a low twist, and small pearl earrings rested at her ears. She carried a laptop and one structured handbag. Daniel had not seen her dressed for herself in years. Ryan took her suitcase with easy familiarity. Coffee is in the car, he said. It's cold out here. Thank you. Evelyn? Daniel's voice cracked. Who is he? She did not answer. Daniel rushed toward her. Ryan moved between them before Daniel's hand reached her arm. Mr. Carter, Ryan said evenly, do not touch her. She's my wife. She has retained counsel and asked you not to contact her directly. Respect that. Daniel pointed at him. And who are you? Ryan handed him a card. Ryan Hart, MD Chief Executive Officer, Hart Medical Group Vice Chair, Harborview Medical Center Board. Daniel recognized the name. Hart Medical owns several hospitals, specialty clinics, and research partnerships worth billions. Evelyn is returning to Harborview under a supervised reentry program, Ryan said. I am helping coordinate it. The source story called him her fiancé, but Evelyn refused to use another man as a prop. In this American version of her life, she did not need to announce a replacement relationship at dawn. Ryan's presence was enough to show Daniel that she had a professional world he had never bothered to understand. Daniel's jealousy still flared. You expect me to believe this is only professional? Evelyn finally looked at him. What you believe is no longer a household concern. I made a mistake. Megan deceived me. Megan did not take wedding vows with me. I was confused. You were clear enough to instruct your lawyer and divide our property by text. Daniel lowered his voice. Don't leave now. I may have a serious infection. I need help understanding the tests. Ryan's expression hardened. Then call your physician. Evelyn is not your unpaid medical service. Evelyn handed Daniel a business card from her divorce attorney. A petition will be filed today. The proposed property settlement is available through counsel. The house is separate property held by a trust my father funded before our marriage, so you had no authority to offer it to me. Your access was revoked by the trustee after your message. Daniel stared at the card. Your father funded it? Yes. You said your family owned a small business. I said they valued privacy. You supplied the word small. Ryan placed the suitcase in the trunk. Evelyn continued. There is one more fact you should know before your attorneys begin making threats. My father is Victor Lawson. Daniel's face emptied. Lawson Pharmaceuticals was one of the largest medical manufacturers in the country. Daniel had spent years trying to secure a partnership with its research division. He had once waited 4 hours at a conference hoping for a 30-second introduction to Victor Lawson. That Victor Lawson? There is only one you have spent 5 years trying to impress. Images rearranged themselves in Daniel's mind, the emergency loan that saved Carter Biotech 2 years earlier. The government pilot project Evelyn said a former professor might support. The hospital network that suddenly agreed to trial his devices after months of rejection. He had credited his own brilliance. Evelyn had quietly opened doors and then stepped aside so he could believe he opened them. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted to know whether you loved me without the Lawson name. I did. Her expression did not change. You texted me from another woman's hotel room to explain that I was being replaced by a healthier mother for your child. The sentence left no room for defense. Evelyn entered the car. Before Ryan closed the door, she looked at Daniel one final time. 3 years at home did not make me beneath you. It made me forget I had options. You corrected that mistake. The sedan pulled away. Daniel remained beside the locked house as sunlight burned through the fog. His phone rang. Megan's name appeared on the screen. He declined the call. Then his deputy chief executive called. Daniel, Lawson Pharmaceuticals has suspended the catheter development partnership effective immediately. They cite management integrity concerns and a pending compliance review. Without their materials license, production stops today. Daniel gripped the car door. They can't terminate without cause. Legal says the agreement permits suspension if reputational or compliance risk could affect regulated products. They are exercising that clause, not terminating yet. Another call arrived before the first ended. A hospital customer wanted to postpone a shipment. Then another requested a quality audit. Then a lender asked whether Daniel faced a personal scandal that could destabilize management. By the time he reached Carter Biotech headquarters, employees were watching him in the particular way people watched someone whose private disaster had become business risk. The executive conference room filled within 20 minutes. Legal, finance, manufacturing, and public relations took seats around the table. Daniel arrived without changing clothes. His tie was missing, and his face looked gray under the fluorescent lights. Lawson's suspension cuts off the specialty polymer we use in the new catheter line, the manufacturing chief said. We have enough inventory for one production shift. Find another supplier. The material is covered by cross-licensed patents. Any substitute requires testing and regulatory review. Months, not hours. The general counsel slid a document forward. If we sue immediately, Lawson will likely counterclaim for patent infringement and invoke the morals and compliance clause. We need to know what happened before we choose a strategy. Daniel looked around the table. Nothing happened that affects the company. No one believed him. His assistant, Lucas Reed, placed a phone on the table. An anonymous internal message board displayed a blurry image of Megan's travel clearance. Personal identifiers were obscured, but the diagnoses and Daniel's relationship to the employee were obvious from the comments. The messages were cruel. CEO abandons physician wife for pregnant assistant rushed to emergency surgery. Management judgment raises compliance concerns. Was company travel clearance ignored because the employee was sleeping with the CEO? The last question was the most dangerous. It turned adultery into a governance issue. Daniel's face reddened. Find whoever leaked this. Cybersecurity is investigating, Lucas said. But the document was stored in a company archive accessible to several HR and executive users. We also have to consider whether ignoring the clearance violated travel safety policy. She never traveled. Because the trip was changed to a domestic conference after the form was filed. That may help, but it doesn't answer why the executive sponsor never read a restriction involving an employee he supervised. Daniel struck the table. I said find the leak. The general counsel did not flinch. And I am telling you the board will ask about the conflict of interest. Did you have a romantic relationship with your direct report? Silence. Did you approve compensation, travel, or promotion decisions affecting her? Silence again. The lawyer closed his folder. Then the company has a serious problem even if no medical information had leaked. At 10:10, Megan arrived in a wheelchair, discharged after surgery against medical advice. A security officer tried to stop her, but she shouted until employees gathered behind the glass walls. "Daniel! You can't abandon me now." He walked out of the conference room, fury overtaking fear. "You should be in the hospital. You left me there alone. You lied about the pregnancy." "I was pregnant. It was ectopic. That's not my fault." "You lied about the dates. You lied about the ultrasound. You hid the infection." Megan's face crumpled. "I was afraid you'd choose her. I destroyed my marriage for you." "No. You destroyed it because you wanted to. Don't put that on me." The words landed before dozens of witnesses. Daniel glanced around and saw phones discreetly raised. "Take her outside," he ordered security. Megan gripped the arms of the wheelchair. "You said you'd protect me. You said you'd divorce her, give me the house, and make me vice president after the acquisition." The general counsel appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Carter, say nothing further." "Too late." Megan laughed through tears. "Now I'm sick, so I'm disposable? You slept with me without asking a single question. You ignored the form because you thought rules were for other people. And now you want to call me dirty?" Daniel's expression twisted. "You manipulated me. You were easy to manipulate." Security began moving her toward the elevator. She shouted over her shoulder. "Evelyn warned you because she's a doctor. I warned you about your wife because I wanted her life. You're the one who decided which warning to believe." The elevator doors closed. No one in the office spoke. By noon, the board placed Daniel on temporary administrative leave pending an investigation of the relationship, compensation decisions, and misuse of confidential employee information. The company issued a statement saying patient privacy would be protected and that medical conditions would not be used to shame any employee. Daniel sat alone in his office while the statement circulated. For the first time, he understood the full shape of what he had lost. Evelyn had given up a surgical career to support him. She had protected his parents, his health, his company, and his pride. He had interpreted her sacrifice as a reduction in value. Megan had reflected his vanity and offered him the fantasy of a younger, easier future. He had interpreted that performance as love. Neither woman had made his decisions for him. His phone displayed a message from Evelyn's attorney. The petition for dissolution had been filed. All future communication must pass through counsel. A forensic accountant would review Carter Biotech stock, marital compensation, and any benefits transferred to Megan. Daniel typed a reply, deleted it, and typed again. "Please tell Evelyn I am sorry." He deleted that too. An apology sent through counsel would not restore the years he had taken. The board investigation uncovered more than anyone expected. Megan's compensation had increased 40% in 12 months without documented performance review. Daniel approved a housing allowance normally reserved for executives and charged several hotel suites to client development accounts on weekends when no client meetings occurred. Her promotion bypassed 3 qualified employees. Those facts, not her diagnoses, frightened investors. The company handled sensitive medical products. Regulators expected leaders to disclose conflicts of interest, maintain accurate travel records, and protect employee information. Daniel's affair touched every one of those obligations. At an emergency board session, outside counsel projected a timeline across the wall. "The relationship began no later than March," she said. "Mr. Carter approved Ms. Quinn's salary adjustment in April, travel reimbursement in May, and a title change in June. No conflict disclosure was filed. In August, he signed her overseas assignment despite an incomplete medical clearance." Daniel interrupted. "The trip never occurred. Because the client changed the location, not because management caught the issue. This is personal. It became corporate when corporate money and authority were used." One director asked whether Evelyn had leaked the clearance. The privacy officer answered, "We have no evidence of that. In fact, Dr. Lawson notified us before dawn that the archive contained sensitive information and requested access restriction." The file was later downloaded by an HR administrator and 2 executive accounts. We are investigating those downloads. Daniel felt every face turn toward him. His account was one of them. He had opened the file from the hotel. The second executive account belonged to Lucas, who accessed it at Daniel's instruction while trying to understand the crisis. The HR administrator claimed she downloaded it after hearing rumors and then forwarded a screenshot to a private group. That screenshot spread. Evelyn had not created the scandal. The company had exposed itself through weak controls and gossip. The board's chair, Helen Monroe, folded her hands. Mr. Carter, you repeatedly suggested Dr. Lawson orchestrated events against you. The evidence shows she warned the privacy office, removed herself from company systems, and communicated through counsel. Daniel looked down. She knew Lawson Pharmaceuticals would suspend us. She may have expected a compliance review. That is not the same as ordering retaliation. Victor Lawson recused himself, and the committee vote was unanimous. Because everyone knows she's his daughter. Helen's expression cooled. Are you suggesting a regulated manufacturer should ignore governance risk so your divorce feels less consequential? Daniel had no answer. The board appointed an interim chief executive. As Daniel left the meeting, reporters waited outside the building. His attorney guided him through a service corridor, but one question reached him. Mr. Carter, did you pressure your physician wife to leave medicine before beginning an affair with a subordinate? He kept walking. At home, the penthouse he purchased before marrying Evelyn. Silence greeted him. For years he had complained that her routines made their house feel too orderly. Now he understood order had been a form of care. Without it, unopened mail covered the kitchen counter, medication bottles expired, and every room echoed. He found one of Evelyn's old medical notebooks in a drawer. The margins contained careful diagrams and notes written during residency. Between 2 pages was a card he had given her on their first anniversary. To the woman who saves lives and still finds time to save me. Daniel sat on the floor holding the card. He had once recognized exactly who she was. Success had not made him blind. It had made him decide that her light should be redirected toward him. He called Dr. Hayes, hoping she might persuade Evelyn to speak with him. The physician's answer was immediate. No. I only want to apologize. Apologies do not require access to the person you harmed. Write it down. Give it to your lawyer. Accept that she may never read it. You don't understand our marriage. I understand that she left a surgical career after you promised to support her, and you later used that sacrifice as evidence she had no life. I understand enough. The call ended. Daniel wrote the apology anyway. It filled 8 pages. He described fear, ego, loneliness, pressure, and Megan's manipulation. When he finished, he saw how often every paragraph explained himself and how rarely it centered Evelyn. He tore it up. The next morning, Carter Biotech's lenders demanded additional collateral. Daniel had pledged much of his stock for earlier expansion, and the falling valuation triggered margin requirements. Assets he considered permanent began turning into numbers on liquidation schedules. The house he had offered Evelyn as compensation was not his. The company he believed made him powerful could remove him. The mistress he described as dependent had retained counsel against him. Every possession he used to define himself had conditions. Evelyn's identity, by contrast, became stronger as she shed the roles he had assigned her. Evelyn returned to Harborview on a Monday morning. The hospital smelled exactly as she remembered: antiseptic, coffee, warmed linen, and the faint metallic scent of machinery. She expected nostalgia. Instead, she felt as though a locked part of her mind had opened and begun breathing. Her re-entry was not magical. American credentialing rules did not allow a surgeon to disappear for 3 years and walk directly into an operating room. She completed simulations, continuing education assessments, supervised procedures, and a formal review of her clinical privileges. Dr. Hayes met her outside the skills lab. I should be angry with you, the older physician said. You are. Furious. 3 years of your life traded for a man who texted you a divorce notice. Evelyn lowered her eyes. Dr. Hayes pulled her into a brief embrace. But you're here. We can work with here. Ryan coordinated the administrative process but never treated Evelyn as fragile or indebted. When reporters began waiting near the hospital entrance, he arranged security. When gossip columns called him her new lover, he issued one statement: Dr. Lawson's personal life is private. Her professional qualifications speak for themselves. There was no fake engagement, no theatrical replacement husband. Evelyn's victory did not depend on being claimed by a more powerful man. Her father, Victor Lawson, arrived at her apartment that evening. He was a tall man with silver hair and the reserved manner of someone accustomed to boardrooms. For 3 years, Evelyn had spoken to him only through occasional encrypted emails. "You look thin," he said. "You always say that." "Because you always are." They stood awkwardly for a moment, both too proud to move first. Then Victor opened his arms. Evelyn stepped into them. "I was wrong," she whispered. "About Daniel?" "About believing I had to cut off my family to prove my marriage was real." Victor held her tighter. "Love that requires you to erase your name is not love. But I should not have let anger keep me away." They apologized without pretending the lost years could be recovered. Lawson Pharmaceuticals' suspension of Carter Biotech's project had not been ordered as a father's revenge. The company's compliance committee acted after learning that Daniel ignored an employee medical restriction, maintained an undisclosed relationship with a direct report, and potentially exposed regulated partnerships to governance risk. Victor recused himself from the vote. "I wanted to destroy him," he admitted. "Your mother reminded me that due process is more painful because it leaves no one to blame but himself." The investigation did exactly that. Carter Biotech's board found Daniel had approved unauthorized compensation for Megan, altered her reporting line to conceal their relationship, and used corporate travel funds for personal hotel stays. Several lenders tightened terms. The Lawson project remained suspended. Daniel's equity value fell, and the forensic accountant added the lost marital value to the divorce negotiations. Megan recovered physically and retained her own attorney. She filed a workplace complaint alleging retaliation and unequal treatment after the affair became public. Evelyn refused every request from reporters to comment on Megan's diagnoses. "Her health is not evidence of character," Evelyn told her attorney. "The concealment affected Daniel, and the corporate conflict affected the company. That is all." The distinction mattered. Daniel had tried to reduce 2 women to categories: the infertile wife and the fertile mistress. Reality had punished that thinking. Bodies were not moral verdicts, pregnancy was not proof of worth, and disease did not erase humanity. What condemned Daniel was not that he encountered medical risk. It was that he lied, abused authority, and expected the women around him to bear consequences he chose. 3 weeks later, Evelyn performed her first supervised surgery since returning. The patient was a young woman with internal bleeding from an ectopic pregnancy. The similarity to Evelyn's last case before leaving was almost unbearable. She scrubbed in, positioned her hands, and felt the old steadiness return. 39 minutes later, the bleeding was controlled. In recovery, Dr. Hayes removed her mask. "Still yours," she said. "What?" "The hands." They were waiting. Evelyn looked down at them. For years, Daniel had praised those hands only when they prepared his meals or adjusted his tie. The operating room remembered what they were made to do. Outside the hospital, Daniel waited beside the parking garage. He looked older. Administrative leave had become resignation after the board demanded it. His tailored suit hung loosely, and there were shadows beneath his eyes. Ryan saw him first. "Do you want security?" Evelyn shook her head. "Stay nearby." She approached Daniel but stopped several feet away. "You should communicate through counsel." "I know. I only wanted 5 minutes." "You have 2. He swallowed. "My tests were negative. I completed the follow-up anyway." "Good. Megan is recovering." "Good. The company may survive, but I won't remain CEO." Evelyn waited. He had not come to report facts. He wanted absolution. "I didn't know who you were," he said. "You knew I was your wife." "That should have been enough." His face tightened. "I mean your family, your career, all the things you hid." "Would my father's net worth have made adultery wrong?" No. Then it is irrelevant. Daniel lowered his head. I miss you. You miss the person who solved your problems. I loved you. Perhaps you loved being loved by me. He closed his eyes. Evelyn felt no pleasure in his collapse. Revenge fantasies had promised satisfaction, but standing before him produced only distance. The settlement can be completed through our attorneys, she said. I am not returning. Is there someone else? Ryan? There is me. That is the person I neglected for 3 years. She turned away. Daniel called her name once. She did not look back. The divorce negotiations lasted 6 months. Daniel's first proposal attempted to exclude the appreciation of Carter Biotech stock by claiming it was separate property. Evelyn's forensic accountant traced years of uncompensated work she provided to the company, marital funds used during expansion, and benefits transferred to Megan. The final settlement awarded Evelyn a substantial cash payment, reimbursement for family funds used in Daniel's business, and a share of the marital increase in stock value. She did not seek control of Carter Biotech. Ownership in Daniel's company felt less like wealth than a chain. She also insisted on a confidentiality clause protecting Megan's lawful medical privacy. Daniel's attorney found the demand surprising. Ms. Quinn helped destroy your marriage, he said during mediation. Evelyn's lawyer answered before she could. Mr. Carter destroyed the marriage. Ms. Quinn participated in an affair and made serious misrepresentations, but her medical diagnoses are not public property. Evelyn nodded. The mediator watched Daniel. He looked away. Megan's employment complaint settled separately. Carter Biotech paid damages without admitting liability, corrected its reporting policies, and required all executives to complete conflict of interest training. The company also implemented strict health data access controls after the leaked clearance. Daniel hated that the reforms would be remembered as consequences of his conduct, but he signed them. When the dissolution order was finally entered, Evelyn stood outside the courthouse beneath a pale spring sky. There was no dramatic music, no crowd, and no triumphal speech. Her attorney handed her a certified copy. The marriage that had consumed 7 years ended in a folder thin enough to carry under one arm. How do you feel? Rachel asked. Evelyn considered the question. Hungry. They went for lunch that evening. Victor hosted dinner at the Lawson family home. Evelyn's mother prepared too much food and pretended not to cry. Ryan brought wine. Dr. Hayes arrived late from surgery and complained that wealthy families never served dessert early enough. No one toasted Daniel's downfall. Victor raised his glass to Evelyn's return. To the doctor who remembered her own name. Evelyn smiled. To the family that let me come home without saying I told you so. Her father lifted one eyebrow. I said it privately many times. Laughter filled the room. For years, Evelyn had imagined returning to her family as defeat, proof that her choice of husband had failed. Instead, returning required more courage than staying hidden. Later, she walked through her childhood bedroom. Medical textbooks still lined one shelf. A framed photograph showed her at residency graduation between Victor and her mother. She had hidden that picture from Daniel because he resented reminders that her family and career existed before him. Evelyn carried it back to her apartment and placed it on the desk. The next day, she began work on the Maternal Emergency Program proposal. Its first section addressed rapid diagnosis of ectopic pregnancy, particularly for patients who delayed care because of fear, cost, stigma, or controlling partners. Evelyn did not mention Megan, but the case influenced every page. Medicine had taught her that people often arrived at hospitals carrying both illness and shame. A good physician treated the illness without feeding the shame. Her marriage had taught her something similar about life. Truth could be sharp without being cruel. Boundaries could be absolute without turning another person's body into a weapon. When the program received approval, Evelyn hired nurses, social workers, and patient advocates along with surgeons. She wanted no woman to feel that emergency care depended on whether a husband believed her. On the first day of the new unit, a brass plaque appeared beside the entrance, Lawson Maternal Emergency CENTR Care Without Judgment. Treatment without delay. Evelyn touched the engraved words once, then went inside. Before the final settlement, Evelyn faced one test she had not anticipated. A local television producer obtained part of the leaked clearance and offered her an exclusive interview. The email promised sympathetic coverage, restoration of her reputation, and a chance to tell the world what kind of woman destroyed your home. Rachel read the proposal aloud and waited. "Delete it," Evelyn said. "They will probably run the story without you. Then our response should say the document was private, its circulation was wrong, and medical status is not a moral category." Rachel leaned back. "That may disappoint people who want a cleaner revenge story. My life is not content for people who need a villain with laboratory results." The station aired a segment anyway. It blurred Megan's name but repeated enough details that viewers identified her. Social media filled with vicious jokes and dehumanizing language. Evelyn issued a short statement through counsel. "I did not authorize, distribute, or endorse the release of any person's medical information. My divorce concerns betrayal, misuse of corporate authority, and financial misconduct. Illness deserves treatment, not public humiliation." The statement changed the conversation. Physicians, patient advocates, and privacy experts shared it widely. Several commentators who had treated the scandal as entertainment apologized. Megan saw the statement from her recovery apartment. She called Evelyn's attorney and requested permission to send a letter. Evelyn agreed to receive it but promised nothing more. The letter arrived handwritten on 6 pages. Megan admitted she had pursued Daniel deliberately. She described envying Evelyn's home, marriage, and social position. She had believed Daniel's complaints that his wife was cold, infertile, and dependent. When she found evidence that Evelyn had a distinguished medical career, she convinced herself it was irrelevant because Evelyn had abandoned it. Megan also admitted she exaggerated the pregnancy timeline and produced a misleading ultrasound image downloaded from a parenting forum. The positive test was real, but she had avoided medical care because she feared discovering a complication. She planned to secure Daniel's divorce before anyone could question the story. The letter did not excuse her. It did, however, reveal fear beneath the manipulation. At the end, Megan wrote, "You warned him to take me to the hospital. I might have died if you had stayed silent. I don't expect forgiveness. I need you to know I understand that." Evelyn folded the pages. Ryan, who had brought dinner, asked whether she would answer. "I don't know." "You don't owe her comfort." "No. But I may owe the truth." She eventually wrote 3 sentences. "I do not forgive what you did, and I will not participate in rewriting it. I am glad you received treatment. Build a life that does not require taking someone else's place." Megan never contacted her again. The exchange remained private. Daniel learned of the letter during discovery because Megan disclosed it to her attorney. He reacted with anger. "She apologized to Evelyn but not to me?" His attorney stared at him. "She filed a claim alleging you retaliated against her after a relationship you concealed from the board. I would not expect an apology. She lied to me. And you lied to your wife, board, employees, and business partners. Litigation is not a contest to identify the only dishonest person." Daniel dismissed the attorney 2 weeks later and hired another who told him what he preferred to hear. The new lawyer promised aggressive claims against Evelyn and Lawson Pharmaceuticals. Those claims failed quickly. The judge denied an emergency request to force Lawson to resume the partnership, finding that Karma Biotech had agreed to the suspension clause and could not show irreparable harm caused by unlawful conduct. The court also warned Daniel's counsel against using divorce proceedings to obtain Evelyn's confidential hospital employment records. Outside the courthouse, Daniel blamed the Lawson family's influence. His new attorney said nothing. Privately, the lawyer understood that influence was not the primary problem. Documentation was. Evelyn had records. Lawson had committee minutes. Harborview had credentialing files. Karma Biotech's own systems contained Daniel's approvals and messages. Power could bend uncertainty, but it struggled against a clean timeline. Evelyn's forensic accountant, Naomi Brooks, created that timeline for the divorce. She traced a $600,000 transfer from marital funds into Karma Biotech during a cash shortage. Daniel had described it as his personal contribution. Bank records showed the money originated in an account funded by Evelyn's premarital trust. Naomi also identified $184,000 in benefits, travel, jewelry, and housing support directed to Megan through corporate or marital accounts. "He offered you a house he didn't own while spending shared funds on an employee," Naomi said. "That combination will not impress a judge." Evelyn felt embarrassment rise. I reviewed hospital budgets worth millions. How did I miss my own household accounts? You didn't miss them because you lacked intelligence. You trusted your spouse and were managing everyone else's needs. Financial abuse often hides inside delegated responsibility. The words relieved something Evelyn had carried like a private accusation. Competent women were not immune to betrayal. Expertise in one field did not make a person incapable of trust, and trust was not stupidity merely because someone exploited it. During mediation, Daniel arrived with the posture of a man prepared to bargain. He began by offering the house again. Rachel interrupted. The trust owns the house. Mr. Carter has been told this repeatedly. Daniel's lawyer whispered to him. He shifted. Then I will give Evelyn additional company shares. Evelyn spoke for the first time. I don't want a stake in a company whose governance depends on your moods. Pay the documented marital value in cash over a secured schedule. You know the company doesn't have that liquidity. Then pledge your remaining stock and investment properties. You want to ruin me. I want enforcement. You taught me promises are not assets. The mediator looked down to hide a reaction. Daniel leaned forward. You could stop all of this. Tell your father to restore the project, and the company value rebounds. Then everyone receives more. The compliance committee is independent. Nothing in your family is independent. Evelyn's eyes cooled. That belief is why you never understood me. You think every relationship is a lever. My father can love me without corrupting a committee. Ryan can help me without owning me. Dr. Hayes can criticize me without abandoning me. She placed one hand on the settlement draft. You only recognize care when it gives you control. Daniel had no reply. The mediator separated them into different rooms. Hours later, an agreement emerged. Daniel would make a substantial initial payment, secure the remainder with property, reimburse the traceable trust contribution, and accept a neutral valuation of the marital stock appreciation. Both parties waived claims to the other's separate professional assets. When Rachel brought the final page, Evelyn read every line. You can sign, Rachel said. It protects you. Evelyn signed. Her hand did not shake. Daniel signed in another room. For 7 years, he had treated Evelyn's steadiness as proof she would tolerate anything. In the end, that steadiness was what allowed her to leave without surrendering truth, money, profession, or dignity. Evelyn also had to rebuild ordinary habits that marriage had quietly erased. At first, she woke at midnight expecting to hear Daniel's car. She bought groceries for 2 and automatically selected the brand of coffee he preferred. She reached for her phone whenever a medical device advertisement appeared, ready to send him an idea. Each reflex felt like a thread still tied to the old life. She cut them one by one. She replaced the coffee. She rearranged the kitchen. She enrolled in a weekend surgical simulation course without checking anyone else's calendar. She bought running shoes and began walking along the waterfront before dawn, not because exercise would make her more acceptable, but because the cold air reminded her she occupied her own body. Therapy helped too. The therapist asked why Evelyn had hidden the Lawson name. I wanted Daniel to choose me rather than my family. And when he chose you, did you feel safe? Evelyn thought about the years of proving she was undemanding, useful, and loyal. No. I kept testing the choice. By giving up more? Yes. Then perhaps you were not testing his love. Perhaps you were paying for it. The observation stayed with her. Healthy love was not purchased through self-erasure. It did not become more authentic because a woman had fewer witnesses, less money, and no career to retreat to. When Evelyn told Victor about the session, he listened without defending himself. I made you believe family support came with conditions, he said. When you married Daniel against my advice, I withdrew instead of leaving the door open. That was pride, not parenting. They could not rewrite the past, but they could name it accurately. That winter, Evelyn invited her parents to the hospital's holiday concert. Victor sat in the front row wearing the same severe expression he used at shareholder meetings. When Evelyn was recognized for helping launch the maternal emergency center, He stood before anyone else. His applause was loud and entirely undignified. Evelyn laughed from the stage. Later, a nurse handed her a bouquet with no card. For a moment she wondered whether Daniel had sent it. Then Dr. Hayes appeared and complained that the florist had forgotten her name. "You looked worried," Dr. Hayes said. "I thought the flowers came from someone else." "Throw them away if they ever do. These are mine, and they were expensive." Evelyn kept them until the last petal fell. The new life did not arrive as one triumphant transformation. It accumulated through such moments: a meal eaten without waiting, a phone left unanswered, a difficult surgery completed, a family dinner attended, a morning when she realized she had slept through the night. By the time the divorce became final, Evelyn no longer needed the court order to tell her the marriage was over. Her days had already stopped arranging themselves around Daniel. On one especially quiet Sunday, she opened the old message thread with Daniel. The 2:17 a.m. announcement remained near the bottom, preserved for the legal file. She read it without the bodily shock it once caused. The words had not changed, but their power had. They were no longer a verdict on her worth. They were evidence of his character and the starting point of her return. Evelyn exported the thread for her attorney, then removed it from her personal phone. She did not delete the past, she relocated it to the place where records belonged, outside the rooms in which she intended to live. Afterward, she cooked dinner for herself. The meal was simple, seasoned exactly the way she liked, and eaten beside an open window. No one arrived late. No one required a special diet. No one asked her to lower her voice, soften an opinion, or be grateful for a life financed partly by her own family. When the sun set, Evelyn washed one plate and placed it in the rack. The kitchen looked peaceful rather than empty. That difference, more than any court filing or public apology, told her she was free. The following week, a resident asked Evelyn why she had returned to surgery after such a long absence. Evelyn considered giving the polished answer about service and professional purpose. Instead, she told the truth. "I left because I thought loving someone required me to make room for his entire life," she said. "I came back when I realized he had never made room for mine." The resident nodded as though storing the sentence for later. Evelyn hoped she would never need it. Before rounds, Evelyn checked the emergency board. 3 patients were waiting, one with symptoms that could indicate an ectopic pregnancy. She moved toward the examination rooms, already reviewing the safest sequence of tests. The work demanded everything she could give, but it did not ask her to disappear. That was the distinction Daniel had never understood. Devotion could be exhausting and still leave a person whole. Erasure always called itself devotion while taking the person away. Evelyn had learned the difference, and she would not forget it again. Her future was not compensation for betrayal. It was the life she had reclaimed herself. Months later, Carter Biotech held an emergency employee meeting to address its restructuring. Daniel attended only because the board required him to answer questions about pending litigation. Megan arrived with counsel. The atmosphere was hostile before either entered. Employees had learned the broad facts, though the company had taken steps to remove illegal copies of medical material and discipline anyone who circulated it. The discussion focused instead on conflicts of interest, retaliation, and executive judgment. Daniel tried to frame the affair as a private mistake. Megan refused. "It became a company matter when you controlled my pay, travel, title, and access," she said across the conference table. "You told me I would be protected as long as I kept you happy. Then you abandoned me in a hospital and fired me when the relationship embarrassed you." Daniel's attorney objected. Her attorney placed messages on the screen. They documented promises, gifts purchased with company money, and Daniel's instruction to hide the reporting relationship. Megan's deception about her pregnancy timeline remained wrong. Her concealment of medical information from a sexual partner remained dangerous. But those facts did not erase Daniel's abuse of corporate authority. He had wanted a simple story in which one woman was pure and another was dirty. The truth was less flattering. Flawed people had made harmful choices, and the most powerful person in the room had used that power irresponsibly. At Harborview, Evelyn knew nothing about the meeting until a reporter asked for comment. She declined. Her life had moved forward. She had completed her re-entry program, resumed an attending position in obstetric surgery, and joined a research team studying emergency maternal care. Lawson Pharmaceuticals funded the project through a blind grant reviewed by an independent committee to avoid favoritism. On the anniversary of the 2:17 a.m. message, Evelyn finished a late procedure and walked onto the hospital roof. The city lights spread beneath her. Ryan joined her with 2 cups of coffee. Bad night? Good outcome. Long night. He handed her a cup. Your father asked whether you're coming to dinner Sunday. I am. He will pretend not to be pleased. He is terrible at pretending. They stood in companionable silence. Ryan had never asked her to turn gratitude into romance. Perhaps affection would grow, perhaps it would not. Evelyn no longer measured her future by whether a man selected her. Her phone vibrated. A message from Dr. Hayes announced that the board had approved Evelyn as director of a new maternal emergency program. She read it twice. 1 year earlier, another late-night message had told her she was being replaced. This one told her she had returned to herself. Evelyn looked at her hands around the coffee cup. They were scarred in tiny places, steady, and entirely her own. Down below, ambulances moved through the streets with red lights flashing. Somewhere, a patient would need a surgeon before morning. Evelyn turned toward the stairwell. Where are you going? Ryan asked. Back to work. She smiled, opened the door, and stepped into the bright hospital corridor. Daniel's story continued elsewhere in court filings, board minutes, and the quiet consequences of decisions he had believed he could undo. Evelyn no longer needed to watch. She had given him one last medical warning and one final chance to behave with dignity. He had wasted both. What happened next belonged to him. What came next belonged to her. For more exciting content, please subscribe and follow us.